Journalists are destroying themselves, and I'm in no way sympathetic. You get what you deserve. That's how I feel about this. But I think that the problem with journalists is they're a product of the leftist education system that is poisoning the minds of young people, which we actually have a premium video on lotus.com. This is Connor and Bo talking about, examining what exactly young people are being taught in schools. And not economic literacy, not anything of any good or note. It's trash. Find out for yourself by going over and signing up and supporting us. But anyway, so let's begin in May 2020. Remember May 2020?
Just after the lockdown.
Just after the lockdown. Well, Microsoft was we've been thinking a lot about this news, and actually we realized that robots can do your job. Don't need you anymore. But learning to code won't save them, because eventually the code will be written by robots as well. So who knows what you're going to do.
I think already they write a lot of financial journalism.
They do, yeah. Because honestly, it's just
the
because
format is established. All it needs to do is put the numbers in.
Well, yeah, they say they use the AI. They've been using AI to scan for content, but now it's essentially the editorial process is beginning to be done by AI as well. But anyway, let's move on to how the pandemic ravaged journalism in 2020, as the New York Times told us. 33,000 workers at news companies in the US were laid off, furloughed, or had their pays reduced. Some publications that relied on ads were shut down, and this was bad because the news business, as they tell us, was shaky before the coronavirus started spreading across the country. Since then, the economic downturn that put more than 22 million Americans off work has led to cuts, layoffs, and shutdowns at many news outlets. Who asked for the lockdowns? Who asked for the bloody lockdowns? Who was constantly, every day, saying we need to lock down to save grandma from the coronavirus? Who was saying it?
Who was sensationalizing?
Yeah, who blew... I mean, I don't know what we can...
Who was spreading the fear?
I don't know what we can say about the coronavirus on YouTube anymore. So we won't make any comment about anything like that. But as you say, who was sensationalizing? Who was constantly making sure that this was in everyone's face all the time? That was all they could think. Who we're talking about perceptions, as we did earlier. Who made it so the governments were like, oh, God, we have to do something. We have to do something. We have to do something. I mean, I thought that Boris's first reaction was, well, we just got to take it on the chin. I thought that was the right one. And I think that history has vindicated that position.
Yeah, well, Sweden and Norway have done better, haven't they?
Precisely. Much better. But yeah, so 33,000 employees of news media companies, majority of them being journalists.
But somebody Tim cooked him.
But yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know who it was. I don't know what happened there. But he was definitely a changed man, wasn't he?
You've been Tim cooked.
Yeah. Anyway, so moving on, in 2020, BuzzFeed decided to buy Huffington Post. And shortly afterwards, they were like, yeah, actually, we're going to get rid of almost everyone here, which is nice. So they laid off 47 workers, majority of them being journalists. That was 30% of their entire workforce. And generally, the media is facing closure. They shut down Huffington Post Canada entirely during this merger. And the layoffs just basically continued all through 2021. As Pew showed us, well, if you can get to the next one, this was them shutting down in Canada. If you get to the next one, Pew described, well, look, in 2021, only 11% of the entire staff of the journalistic industry was cut, compared to the 30% in 2020. So that's it slowing down. It's like, yeah, because we're no longer in the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the damage you've done to yourself. It turns out that actually the news industry is not some sort of separate ethereal entity that floats at the top of our civilization. There's no connection to what happens on the substrate. No, it turns out that they need everyone else's money to survive. If advertisers don't advertise on their platforms, if people don't buy their papers because of, I don't know, they've been locked in their homes and they've got no money spare because they've been fired from their jobs. Well, that actually affects them. How short-sighted.
I love citizen journalism.
Yeah, me too.
And often you get the truth there that you don't achieve by journalists.
A lot of nonsense.
And I think journalists raid and plagiarize citizen journalists all the time. And because they don't want to be seen as citing citizen, lowly, mucky, smelly citizen journalists, they often then don't credit their sources.
That's very true. And this is a pathology of modern journalism. They don't leave their offices.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that journalists had to go somewhere.
The investigative journalist.
Yeah, I mean, before Twitter, basically, it meant that you had to go out of the office and do something. I mean, this is a costly thing, but at least you got good information. But now they're literally just like, what's X person posted on Twitter? Right, that's my article. So it's made them very lazy. It's made them very arrogant. It's made them completely disconnected from the real world, because no longer are they going to actually meet the people and talking to them and hearing their perspectives. No, they can sit there in their little woke, isolated bubbles and be like, no, everything needs to lock down. No, we need to throw everything at Ukraine to fight the Russians. It's like, look, there are consequences to all of these.
Yeah, I know you don't like journalists as a breed.
Not generally.
And as a breed, a lot of journalists I know are a little bit patronising and haughty, and I always get this sort of thing of I'm better, this sense of why do you think you're better than me? I just feel ever so slightly looked down on. But I mean, there are some brilliant journalists out there, and you're kind of celebrating their demise, and I sympathise with that. But I'm also, it's not nice when somebody loses their job. But it's the internet, it's the changing nature of advertising revenue, it's the rise of citizen journalism, the democratization of media. And if I was a journalist and I've lost my job, all I would say to you is, take the Zulu principle, find a subject that you're an expert in, or if you're not, become an expert in a small subject that interests you, and then go onto Substack or have your own blog, or build up your own blog or build up your own media empire like you have.
But the thing is, a lot of this seems to be directly the consequence of the lockdowns. And I'm sorry, the entire journalistic class, there was a very small segment of the journalistic class that was like, maybe we shouldn't be encouraging lockdowns. Maybe this is bad. Maybe it's wrong to tyrannize people in their own homes and shut down law-abiding businesses. Maybe that's not right. And a lot of them were like, no, this gives us moral superiority. And if there's one thing I like, is these kind of moral tyrants getting their comeuppance. That's what this is, and I'm happy about it. I'm sorry, you literally advocate to take people's property away and give their money to Amazon, or give it to some some local grocery store, give their money to Sainsbury's or Tesco's or something like that. Why should they have been allowed to be open when the little local grocery store isn't? Why should any? It's nonsense, and they all advocate for it. And so I'm in no way sympathetic. Anyway, so moving on, get into March 2021 now. Everyone's in the journalist industry is starting to recognize, hang on, these jobs are precarious. We're insecure. We actually are kind of screwed. Have we screwed ourselves? Yes, you have screwed yourselves. And the thing is as well, because we're media, we were classed as a sort of special case during the pandemic. We were allowed to operate. Now, I wouldn't have shut this down even if we weren't, but we were just given free rein. And so we got to prosper while everyone else was locked up. I'm glad these people aren't prospering, because they all supported this. Anyway, BuzzFeed come March 2022. Again, going back to that last one, right? This is one quote. Amid the undeniable growth of the gig economy that is predicted to accelerate even more in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, that precarity has become the reality of the working lives of both young professionals and low-skilled workers. Well, you did this to yourselves. Nothing had to lock down. Nothing. Anyway, moving on. BuzzFeed making more cuts. It's not going well. The CEO, Jonah Peretti, they've whittled their newsroom by almost 2/3. So 2/3 of their journalists are gone now. Well, what are you going to do? You did this. 3 of their top editors resigned. The company's offered buyouts to staff on half the newsroom's remaining desks. This is a declaration of a strategic shift towards content that requires fewer resources to produce. I guess all the investor money ran out. I guess all the advertiser revenue dried up during the pandemic. And so suddenly, now, come August 2022, more major layoffs in US media. Gannett is a company that owns various, hundreds of media outlets. They own USA Today, 250 local outlets, and have revenues normally total revenues of $748 million. But they've had a net loss of $53 million in the last quarter when this was produced. And so they're like, oh, right, a bunch of you are going to have to go. And it's like, okay. All of these outlets were like, no, lockdowns. We need lockdowns. That video that you see around, it's like, this is very dangerous to our democracy. And it's all of the local news stations saying it. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, right. There's a great montage of local news stations all parroting.
I have seen it.
Yeah, this is very dangerous to our democracy.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's companies like Gannett that control that narrative because they own 250 local outlets.
Okay.
So it's their script that got sent off to the
I
local
see.
outlets. And so it's like, yeah, well, you get what you deserve. I'm sorry. You guys all work for this. You support this. I'm not in any way sympathetic. And so by August 2022, Pew were reporting that by 2020, about 22,000 journalists. The news industry had been reduced by about 22,000 journalists. Big. It wasn't going well before, and then it's going even worse since they advocated destruction of the economy.
Yeah, I like it. I guess this is a good thing about Twitter, which is, I'm just coming back to the citizen journalism thing. When, whoever's the editor, the director of BBC News, for example, he decides what the news agenda for the day is, because he decides what stories we're going to cover. And so he's deciding we're going to have an international one, we're going to have a local one, and he's trying to do a balanced thing. But the beauty of citizen journalism, Twitter, however that journalism is disseminated, the market decides what the news agenda of the day is. So there's a free market for news.
Yes.
And we probably wouldn't know about, for example, the boat, the dinghy, the people trafficking on the dinghies, were it not for the citizen journalists.
How would you know? Shout out to Active Patriot, by the way. He's always down at the beach filming.
Yeah.
Coming in. Again, Twitter citizen journalist, who I happen to know because I follow him, because I want to know what's going on. And every day he posts, 800 new arrivals. BBC wouldn't tell me that. And none of these private areas.
And he's bringing shame on the politicians and the establishment that he's exposing.
Exactly. And so it goes to show you that actual real journalism pays dividends. People, I imagine
We need it.
Yeah, exactly. Not just for him personally. I'm sure that he gets lots of people donating. Thank you to time. But also, and that's another way, like inverting the business model where it's based on donations. So you're incentivized to do good work. And people will say, well, thank you. That's what this entire company is built on. So it's completely opposite. We don't advertise. It's just a much more healthy incentive. And then, as you say, he's actually changing the public dialogue by bringing real video evidence of a scandalous event that no one else wants to talk about. And yet it's still piling up in the public consciousness. Like, no, this is bad. Now the BBC has to start talking about it. Now Priti Patel and Suella Braverman are like, okay, we're going to send them to Rwanda or whatever. And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the citizen journalist.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, this is why, again, I'm not in any way disappointed to see the media losing their grip on the ability to create narratives. If they're scaled down, they can't control the narratives.
You know why a lot of the Guardian journalists are bigger...
Sorry, Guardian journalists. We always put the scale.
Are bigger celebrities than, say, the journos at the Telegraph or the Times. I'll tell you why. Because, so I've written articles for all of those publications, and just loads more people notice when you get something on in the Guardian, because the website is not behind a paywall. So the Guardian website is one of the most fantastic platforms. And you notice a lot of those Guardian journalists, they're fighting tooth and nail to keep that website open and not behind a paywall, even though the subscription model from a business point of view has been proven to work. And so that answers your question. And so all those guys, Owen Jones or whoever it is, they all want to do their sensationalizing on the Guardian platform because that gets them noticed. And if they just would not be the figures that they are,
household names,
without the incredible power of that platform.
Anyway, moving on to the UK in October 2022, massive redundancies. So apparently, since the end of June this year, there have been 739 job losses. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge number compared to the American market. We're a much smaller country, and that's still massive. These are, again, just hundreds and hundreds of journalists like, no, sorry, you're gone. And this is freaking them out. What's interesting is that David Ayrton, a senior organizer with the National Union of Journalists, told Press Gazette that in most cases, employers, quote, refer to the current global situation in relation to the conflict around Ukraine and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath as rationales for layoffs. Oh, who's going Slava Ukraini? Journalists? Who is totally, Putin is the new Satan. We've got to make sure we're constantly at war. Okay, and it's cost you your job. Got to have lockdowns. Got to support Ukraine. Got to support the current thing. And the current thing is currently costing them their jobs. I'm not sad. I'm not in any way sad. Anyway, moving back to Facebook, because you remember in 2020 they were like, can we automate this? It turns out they probably could, because they've basically cut their news team entirely, which is interesting. I think. Sorry, no particular sympathy. Again, social media, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, have you noticed that the Twitter trending tab is a lot less political these days? Have you noticed?
I haven't, but is that Elon Musk changing?
No, we don't. We've had no like official confirmation or anything. But before, if you looked at it, it was always political. Everything on it was, whatever the current thing was. And now you get a lot of football or like, anime. It's just like, the sort of junk normal people talk about, rather than just political propaganda. And it's the same with Facebook and the sort of thing you find on there. So it's interesting how Facebook has apparently shifted resources away from its news tab, shuttered the bulletin newsletter program, and ended support for instant articles, eliminated human curation in favor of algorithms, and stopped paying US publishers to use their news content.
That's a big one, the last one.
Yes, the source of funding for the propaganda mill is drying up. Maybe, just saying, if you weren't constantly being like, we need to do everything we can to ruin the economy, you would be in this position. And the
tide is turning, Carl.
It's great to see, isn't it? It's always like I said, it's always nice to end the week on a positive segment. People always complain, look, everything you say is just terrible, because it's not that I don't like the content. It's just it's bad news, constantly bad news. I'm like, yeah, but everything's terrible, except for this. So on a Friday afternoon, we're going to try and make it a tradition that we have a positive news story. And I think just to end this one off, CNN laying off again a lot of their major primetime news network figures. That's just good news. Yeah. CNN bloodbath, according to the Daily Mail. Yeah, good news. That's what I like to hear.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Contemplation series that Josh does, and you can find out here the latest one being, celebration of 2 years since the start of the Lotus Eaters, and the brief history therein. If you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.